The following is a Podcast One Minnesota production.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, you betcha, yeah.
If it's made in Minnesota, who's making it and how?
Yeah, you got that right.
It's the makers of Minnesota, focusing on the products and services uniquely made in Minnesota, and conversations with the makers, entrepreneurs, and innovators in Minnesota about how they conceived of their products and how they brought them to market. With Stephanie Hansen, it's the makers of Minnesota.
Hi, it's Stephanie Hansen, and you're listening to the Makers of Minnesota podcast, and we are on episode number 49. If you've enjoyed what you're listening to, you'd be surprised how many people in the world still, they know about podcasts, but they don't really know how to find them. So if you could help them find on their phone or through Stitcher or Podcast One, any of the apps, I find is a very helpful way to find podcasts. And introduce your friends, because the podcast world is growing. There's a lot of expanded content that you can find there. And this Makers of Minnesota podcast, 1 minute we're talking to someone who designed an app, and the next minute we might be talking to someone who breeds honeybees. It's just people doing cool things in the state of Minnesota, hearing more about how they do them. And today, for episode 49, we're here with Micah Sveda, right? Did I get it right?
You got it, yep.
Oh, he just went through it with me, and I knew I was going to say it wrong. Micah Sveda, he is the owner of Bootstrap Coffee Roasters. And you brought in some coffee for me, and it's some beans. You brought me an Ethiopia Adadu and Blue Collar Blend. And I wish you guys had smell-o-vision, because the beans themselves smell so different than coffee. They smell more like chocolate or kind of cinnamony. And when you walked into the studio, I was like sniffing your shirt. I was like, do you smell like coffee? I imagine that you would smell like coffee. So, you got your start apparently in the Twin Cities at Quixotic Coffee and worked at Caribou. What was it about coffee that really just like turned you on? You were like, wow, I'm going to make a business out of this.
Yeah. I think it was a matter of really just falling in love with the industry and with the product itself. And I think there's a lot of community, a lot of collaboration in the industry, and really just a connection with people. And I think that is still, kind of a big force that, gets me kind of excited about being part of this industry.
If you're thinking about coffee, like in some respects like wine or chocolate, you're getting this terroir of the soil or the growers. How is it that you literally roast this coffee in a warehouse in St. Paul?
Mm-hmm.
So you go and do you get the beans and import them and meet the people and then...
Yeah, so most coffee is bought and sold through importing companies.
Like a commodity?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a whole range of coffee, right? Everywhere from, every stuff you would buy in the grocery store, like the ground can stuff, all the way to super high-end stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And those are bought and sold any number of different ways. We work pretty closely with importing companies who help us to set up with coffees that really work for our menu and the sort of coffees we're looking for. So they work directly with coffee producers and cooperatives of coffee producers,
Mm-hmm.
And then other organizations at origin countries to select those coffees.
So let's say you, as a coffee roaster, and me as a coffee roaster have the same bean.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something about the way you roast it that brings out better coffee than maybe the way I would roast it if indeed I was a roaster? Is it an art?
Yeah, it can. It can be different. It can be pretty different. Definitely there's a whole range of possibilities. You're manipulating this raw product over, anywhere from kind of 7 or 8 up to 14 minutes. And so there's a whole range of possibilities there in terms of not only roast level, but exactly how you're manipulating the heat and the airflow of your roaster to really kind of draw out different aspects. So if you and I had the same coffee, and let's let's say, was kind of a coffee from, let's say, Guatemala that was maybe a little bit lower acidity, had a nice kind of chocolatey flavor, had a little bit of kind of floral aspect to it as well. Let's say you roasted it in such a way that you wanted to highlight those chocolatey notes, and maybe I wanted to highlight a little bit more of the acidity. So you and I would roast them in different ways depending on exactly what we wanted to bring out in that coffee. So.
And when you talk about the acidity in coffee, is that like what makes your stomach hurt when you drink too much?
So there's, so coffee has acid. Most coffee is about the same pH as a carrot.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not incredibly high pH. It's around 5. So it can be. It depends on a little bit of how it's brewed. But typically when coffee people are talking about acidity, it's the level of kind of sparkle that the coffee has. Perceived acidity.
If you have a bad bean, can you make a good coffee? And if you have a good bean, can you make a bad coffee? Is the making of it as important as the bean itself or the roasting of the bean?
Yeah. I mean, if you have a bad coffee, you really have no chance of getting a good cup.
It's just you're done.
Yeah,
yep.
Pretty much. I mean, you can follow good coffee brewing principles and it could maybe be okay. But if you also have a good coffee, you can ruin that too.
So are you working yourself? Are you like a one-man band?
I started out that way. So when I started, it was 3 years ago in May, so just over 3 years now. And it was literally just me. I had a small roaster. It was a 6-pound batch size. I started to grow, and we started to kind of build customers pretty steadily. So now we upgraded. We're in the same facility, but we have a 25-pound batch size roaster. So we upgraded to a larger machine, and there's 4 of us now.
And did you have to take out loans to get your machines and your equipment, or were you able to cash and carry?
Yeah. So the roaster itself is probably like kind of one of the bigger investments you're gonna make. So, I did. So I did a combination of
the old Amex Visa card.
Yeah, yep. A little bit of that. I also did a small Kickstarter campaign when I got started.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, and then like my life savings. So.
Yeah, exactly. So the Kickstarter campaign, when Kickstarter first started, I thought it was pretty interesting because it was like, oh, people can raise money for their small business. And what I quickly figured out was it was as much a marketing campaign as it was to generate revenue for the business. Was that how it worked for you?
For sure. Yeah, and I think that in order for a Kickstarter campaign to be successful, it kind of has to be a marketing campaign too. Like,
yep.
So we definitely raised a lot of community around our brand by doing that, as well as capital.
And do you think Kickstarter's jumped the sharks in some respects?
How do you mean?
Like, it seems like it's harder to get an organic Kickstarter campaign going that's successful. There's been a lot. Some have failed or people haven't followed through on their promises. I'm just wondering if it's still as popular as a marketing avenue as it once was.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not so much as more. I think there's a lot of other crowdfunding, I guess, competitor, websites. So, but, I think it still has a lot of value.
Yeah, and it seemed like it worked really well for you.
It did. Yeah.
How many brands of coffee do you have now?
So we work really seasonally. Excuse me. So at any given time, we'll have about 7 or 8 coffees on our menu. We have our blue collar blend, which is like kind of our staple, like house coffee.
Yep.
And then we also have our DIY espresso, and those are the mainstay. And so those are products that are always available year round.
Yep.
Everything else is seasonal. So we'll bring in a coffee usually just for like between 2 and 4 months.
And it makes sense that it would be, but that's probably not the way that we see it in a traditional market setting.
Right. Yeah. A lot of roasters have, they'll maybe have, 10 or 15 or even 20 coffees, and they'll just have those available year round. They'll buy sort of the quantity that they need to have, let's say they might have a Mexican coffee single origin on their menu, and it's sort of available year round,
Right.
more or less. And customer can always count on that, and they find that they love that coffee, and they go to it's their go-to coffee. And that model works. What we're doing is a little bit more, like I said, more seasonally focused. So we typically book ahead about a season before the coffee arrives. So the coffees that we're looking at right now are coffees that are going to be arriving in the fall and early winter, and we're starting to plan our menu about what that's going to look like
Right.
now. So then we'll kind of book into those coffees, and we'll sort of commit to a certain quantity, and then and then we'll see those coffees arrive in the fall. So
Who's the biggest retailer for you at this point, or is it yourselves?
it's a mix. Yeah, I mean, our online store is really solid. We also are in a little over half of the co-op grocery stores in town, and then a handful of coffee shops and restaurants and bakeries. So it's a really good mix.
Yeah, a lot of restaurants seem to carry your product too. And it's gotten competitive in the Twin Cities. I mean, there's a lot of specialty coffee companies here.
Yeah.
How do you think yours stands out from like the Dogwoods or Bull Runs or any of those other types of?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of other companies who are doing really good things. I mean, I think that, what we have to offer is just really careful attention to quality and responsible sourcing.
Yep.
So the coffees are really both flavorful and as well as sourced in such a way that they have a lot of transparency. So we celebrate kind of the fact that we're working with producers who are getting paid well and who kind of take care of their farm in a very environmentally conscious way.
Yeah, like a sustainable marketplace type of situation. When you are in the Twin Cities here, and like, where do you go out to eat? Do you have obviously a discriminating palate?
Yeah.
Certainly as it pertains to coffee. Like, do you have a favorite restaurant or?
I mean, my wife and I were pretty much like foodies. I mean, well, not much recently because we just had a baby, so we're kind of like on the DL now. But like, I mean, all over. Like, we like to hit up all the new restaurants. So,
do you think you have like a different palate, like that's more refined, I guess, or more conducive to tasting coffee and being able to taste those subtleties, like someone maybe would be able to taste wine?
I think it's, yes, over and above sort of the average coffee drinker, but that's not really anything like a natural talent or anything. It's just something that has come through working with coffees.
Yeah.
So in the coffee industry, we have, obviously we're tasting our coffees every day through a process called cupping. In the industry, that's what it's called. It's a sort of a ritual of, I mean, maybe some of your listeners have heard of it or seen it. So you're kind of slurping the spoons.
I've only heard of cupping as it pertains to Gwyneth Paltrow putting suction cups on her back. And
yeah, that's a different kind of cupping.
So tell me what this is.
Yeah, so it's throughout the coffee industry, pretty much at every level that's maybe above like the restaurant cafe level.
Yep.
So that's why a lot of consumers don't really know about it because it's not really done there much. But from roasters and to importers, exporters, cooperatives, and then at the farm level too. So it's a ritual of it's a process of evaluating coffees. And it's an efficient way of doing it, so you can evaluate any number of coffees, usually like 6 coffees at a time, but it can be 8, 10, 12.
Yep.
I've seen a couple dozen coffees on one table at once. So basically you have these little cups and you put you grind your coffee a certain amount, and then you evaluate the scent of that freshly ground coffee, and that's called fragrance.
Okay.
Then you put your hot water over the top, and the coffee starts to brew. You wait usually between 3 and 5 minutes, usually 4 minutes. That's what we do at our roastery. And then the coffee will naturally form a crust over the top. And you take a spoon and you break that crust with your nose right about an inch above the cup. And there's a lot of gases that are trapped under there, and so it's extremely aromatic. So then you're smelling the aroma of that freshly brewed coffee.
Mm-hmm.
So then you're taking and you're making notes. You're making notes on everything so far. And there's a scoring system involved, and so then you kind of write down your score for that regular coffee. And then once you do all the cups, then you wait usually 10 or 15 minutes till the coffee is a little bit cooler. And then you go around and you slurp with spoons. And you usually then you taste the coffee when it's hot.
Why do you slurp with a spoon?
Just because it's an efficient way, because then you can take just a little bit, you do your slurp, and then you rinse off your spoon and you go to the next cup.
Got it.
Yep. So you can.
Yep.
So then you taste when it's hot, and then you taste when it's warm, and then you taste when it's cool. So the idea is that the coffee will develop over time, and it changes flavors and the better coffees especially are just more and more dynamic. Coffee tends to get a little sweeter as it cools, and so in order to get a true picture of what that coffee is, that's why we taste it all the way from hot down to room temperature.
And we're seeing a proliferation of sort of cold brews, and I didn't realize this, but you just said it, that the cold brewed coffee tastes different than that same coffee would if it was heated and it's more sweet and there's different characteristics.
Yeah. So that's actually a separate brewing method called cold brew, and that's known for kind of subduing the acidity of coffee and bringing out a lot of body and a lot of other flavors. So and that's definitely like it. I actually just read an article the other day about it's so it's taken over really in a lot of ways. It's really kind of changing the industry in a lot of ways. I mean, we used to kind of plan on summers being a little bit of a slump. People are out and about, which is great. Like restaurants do well, but coffee shops and the coffee industry tends to, dip a little bit just because hot coffee is not the first thing on everyone's mind. But the game is totally different now the last 3 years.
Yeah,
with
it
cold
seems
brew.
like it. I mean, it seems like every coffee shop I pass is full of people and it's doing great.
Yeah.
Which is obviously good for you.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about the next 5 years, do you have growth plans? Are you happy kind of growing incrementally? Are you going to take over the coffee world? What are you trying to accomplish?
Yeah. So what we're looking at in kind of the near term, future, like you said, the next 5 years, as we grow out of our facility, very much like organic and slow but steady growth is kind of where we're at.
Okay.
So,
and would that ever include a coffee shop?
Yeah. So then our next steps is to expand into a larger roasting facility that has a tasting room on site.
Oh, neat.
As well as some kind of training opportunities for both our wholesale customers, but also anyone who wants to kind of sign up for a class.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So,
I remembered, I think Peace Coffee was giving classes that were it was a $25 2-time class. And I thought, well, who needs to go to class to figure out how to make coffee? But you do.
Yeah, there's a lot of subtleties.
And a lot of geeking and a lot of science to it. When you're going to go have a cup of coffee, you're just in town. Where do you go?
I mean, usually one of our customers.
Yep.
I
suppose it's like asking you to pick out your favorite child.
Yeah, but we'll go around too. I mean, I'm a big fan of, specialty coffee in the Twin Cities is, for the most part, really collaborative and supportive.
Yeah, and
it's almost like the craft beer community.
And that will help it grow, I would think. I mean, I'm kind of a Pollyanna about these things.
Yeah.
But...
Yeah. So, I'll go to Dogwood and Spy House and Analace Coffee up in Northeast.
Mm-hmm.
Angry Catfish is is great too. So, and others. So.
All right. We've been talking to Micah Sveda. Did I get it right that time?
Yeah.
Bootstrap Coffee Roasters. Did I read that you guys deliver coffee or have a coffee share or a subscription?
We do have a subscription, yeah.
Tell me about that.
We have a few subscriptions, actually. So we have one that we've had from the beginning. It actually evolved out of that Kickstarter campaign.
Okay.
It evolved out of one of the rewards. And it's basically, since our focus is seasonal, we bring in a lot of coffees for shorter runs. And so we offer the first week of every month, on the first Wednesday of every month specifically, we ship out kind of our latest and greatest. So it's a 12-ounce bag of coffee. It's always a surprise, so it just kind of arrives in your mailbox. You don't know what it's going to be. It's always going to be something great. You also get an informational email with a lot of backstory on that coffee. And,
sure.
About the farmers and sometimes some brewing tips and things like that. And then you also get a promo code for 25% off anything from our online store throughout the month.
So what does a coffee share cost if you're going to do it for like a year?
Yeah, so it's billed monthly.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Yeah, so you can always cancel anytime. It's $19.75.
I love that idea because then you really get to expose yourself to the techniques of your roasting, which from what I hear, you're an amazing roaster.
Well, thank you.
And then also you get to try lots of different coffees themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And then we have a couple other, we have a 5-pound bag option that's good for offices and and then some other, like blend subscriptions if you don't necessarily want to try something new every month. We also have, you can subscribe to our blue collar blends. You always get the same coffee every month.
Yeah.
Or every week or however you want it.
Because isn't it time for offices to have good coffee?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, the coffee is just, it's
It's
terrible.
important. Yeah.
And it, depending on what kind of an industry you're in, coffee counts.
Mm-hmm.
I think
for
that
sure.
should be a T-shirt. Coffee counts.
I'll keep that in the
yeah, that
back
could
of
be
my mind, yeah.
something that comes on down the road. Thank you so much for being with me today.
It's really my pleasure.
The idea of a coffee share sounds really cool. And cupping, you have taught me about cupping, which, again, it's more than just Gwyneth Paltrow putting weird plastic cups on her back. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.